So server-side tracking has come about because of the whole cookieless world that we're all heading into. So when you do server-side tracking, the data that was being handled by the cookies on your browser is now being pushed off to a third-party server. This server now becomes essentially first-party tracking. So to give you some stats on what we're seeing with our clients, typically clients when they go to server-side tracking are seeing between a 10 to 30% increase in attribution to the various platforms. So the amount of traffic that's being classified as direct and none is going down, and we're seeing this 10 to 30% increase in attribution for wherever you're sending your traffic from, Facebook paid or Google paid or wherever it might be.
Is 2023 the year you launch the merch store for your brand? If you're looking for a new revenue line and a way to increase brand loyalty and LTV, you might want to consider it, especially when there's players out there like Printful that make it easy to build your brand's line of merch without any of the operational headaches of inventory management or stock forecasting. Printful's product options run the gamut from socks to hoodies to home decor, and everything's super high quality with printing options that will look amazing with your brand's design on it. If you've got merch on the mind in 2023, think Printful and go to printful.com/enterprise to start creating today. It's all killer, no filler. I'm Eric. This is the D2C podcast. I'm here with Richard Clement for another absolutely riveting but entirely necessary dig out of Google Analytics and GA4. I wanted to start with something basic. We don't have this on the notes here, but I just wanted to start with anyone in the audience who's newer that isn't maybe using Google Analytics. Like, describe the stack for ad buying as you see it and the role of Google Analytics for someone maybe just starting out.
Good question and riveting. Well, we'll do our best. I think it's that ability to have a source of truth, Eric, is what I view Google Analytics as. So, when you look at Google ads, when you look at Facebook ads, when you look at TikTok ads, whatever else you're doing, they've all got their own take on their conversions and attribution, etc. So you need a source of truth, and for me, Google Analytics is that source of truth. And so it's kind of my go-to place if I'm looking at Google ads. I'm going, okay, this is great, but how is this looking in the big picture? And Shopify and these other platforms have got their own data, but Google Analytics goes that much deeper than what you get with Shopify or an e-com platform. So for me, it's a really good source of truth.
And it gives you, any number of views on your data that you can figure out how to show and parse out. But can you just give an example of the most important sort of report or the most important view that you would look at when looking at a Google Analytics report for an e-commerce store?
Oh gosh, I think the first place I always go to in GA is I go into the acquisition section. I have a look at the traffic and the source mediums because I want to see where all the traffic is coming from and how each of those source mediums is actually performing. So the default report that you get has got your number of users, sessions, bounce rates, conversion rates, revenue. So kind of that
by traffic
one
source.
quick summary.
And if we're going full newbie, we have to go back and because there's probably marketers starting out that don't know about UTMs, that don't use UTMs, right? And in order to get that source medium data at a raw level, you need to be making sure that every link you post has UTM equals, source medium. So like if you're listening and you're a beginner out there, there's so many sites out there that just can go help you easily populate your links with all the source medium things to create your UTM's links properly. But it's absolutely a prerequisite for making Google Analytics work.
Absolutely. I mean, tagging, and using the UTMs correctly because they are case sensitive, so, if you don't use them correctly, you'll end up with Facebook with a capital F and with a lowercase f and all sort of stuff, so you do need to use it correctly. But you're absolutely right. Getting back to the basics, tagging everything, email, Facebook ads, TikTok ads, even links on your own site, if you want to see where people are going to, getting all of that property tagged, that is one of the secrets for sure of getting.
And you can go down to the ad level if you want to be really granular about it, right? You can tag all the way down to different creative variables and all those things in the UTMs.
Yep.
Nice.
Absolutely.
UTMs. Okay, so, and we covered this last time, but refresh my memory quickly about the big changes in GA4 versus GA3.
So GA4 is totally event driven, whereas GA3 was all about the session and hits, going really back in the day. So GA4 is totally event driven. So that's the kind of the fundamental difference between the two platforms. And in doing so, everything now has become an event. So even a page view is now an event. And you're probably thinking, well, how does that work? The good thing about having events, and I was going to kind of touch on this probably a bit later, but you can attach all sorts of parameters to events. So even the kind of the page view event, there's all sorts of parameters you can now attach to a page view event, which will tell you, the referring page, the URL of the page, all sorts of stuff that you didn't used to be able to. So that's the fundamental difference, and in doing so, it actually has made Google Analytics a whole lot better.
And what it's lost, I guess, because the session would be tied to the user, right? There'd be a user agent and there'd be a session length but because of all the cookie apocalypse, they're losing that ability to tie it to the duration. So instead, they're trying to take disparate events and then use machine learning to tie those events into customer personas. Is that a layman's?
Yes. That's pretty good. I don't want to get too technical.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people will be switching off, and they won't be.
We did say riveting.
What's that?
We did say riveting. We did say riveting. So let's just move into like really tangible mistakes and opportunities you are seeing with some clients who are moving over to GA4.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, believe it or not, Eric, some people still have not moved to GA4. They've done nothing about setting GA4 up. So for the people who've been living under rocks, GA3 will stop collecting data on the 30th of June or 1st of July. So, there will be no more data coming into your GA3 property, your UA property. So if you haven't already, absolutely get onto it, get a GA4 property set up. Assuming you have set it up, I think the next biggest thing, although Google are now trying to do something about this, which I'll come to in a second, but people aren't setting up their exclusions. So, for example, if you've got an e-com site and you're using Shop Pay, you're using PayPal payments, what you don't want traffic coming from there. So people are on your site, they jump off to shop.app to pay, it comes back. And suddenly Google Analytics shows, this amazing conversion rate from this traffic source called shop.app. Well, that's not a traffic source. That's your payment provider. So using exclusion lists properly within GA4 is probably the next biggest kind of mistake opportunity that we see. People are kind of forgetting to connect up things like Google Ads. So like UA, GA3, GA4 has the ability to connect to certain properties. A lot of them, of course, are Google, but forgetting to connect Google Ads is definitely something else that we see. Audiences, if you're going to use audiences for analysis and or kind of retargeting, then Google Analytics is a great place to do it. You can do it within Google Ads and other places, but GA is probably the best place to do it. Again, using that kind of source of truth analogy. So setting up your audiences, people are kind of forgetting to do that. And the other thing, just to come back to that, what I said earlier about kind of Google Analytics trying to help. So there is now, Google have launched this ability to connect your GA3 properties to your GA4, and it's now coming up automatically and says, do you want to connect this GA3 to this GA4? And what they're doing there is they're giving people the ability to automatically populate things like exclusion lists and audiences and goals that were in their GA3 property and automatically bring them over into GA4, which is good potentially, but so just but be careful when you're doing that, and just make sure that everything is kind of populated. But those would definitely be the biggest kind of opportunities issues that we see when people move over to GA4.
When is AI just going to be able to do all this? Is my one. I guess you may not know that, but it seems like you just have an AI that just like crawls your site. You put in your basic objectives of what you want to do in plain English, and it just connects like one of those little Matrix robots that climbs into Neo's belly. You know,
probably not too far away, because if you think about e-commerce, I mean, people are largely looking for the same pieces of data. What's happening on my site in terms of conversion rates and traffic sources and items and categories, and so we're probably not too many years away from it.
But for now, you got to listen to this podcast, figure it out. Yeah, but for now, you got to listen to this podcast, get GA4 set up, and you mentioned the report, the basic report, the source medium report that allows you to see conversions by traffic source. What other sort of custom reports do you think brands need to set up in GA4?
I think there's 3 that I would kind of recommend. So GA4 is definitely still missing some key things that are still available in GA3, but they're kind of, I don't know, expecting people to get in and sort of kind of play around with the reporting side, the explorations as they're called. And so there's 3 I think that I would recommend, particularly for a lot of D2C ecom sites. So the first one is the funnel report. So the funnel report, as it kind of the name suggests, is a report that will kind of show you the steps that people take through your site. And for an ecom site, it might be something like the first the people that coming into the site, and then are they looking at key pages, possibly product pages might be a good sort of step 2. And then maybe a step 3 would be an add to cart, and step 4 would be a purchase. So that would be a reasonable funnel. And there's actually a kind of default report in the explorations where you kind of put together your custom reports. They've got a template gallery, and one of them is the funnel report, and it breaks it out quite nicely by device category, so you can see the funnel data by
mobile,
desktop, tablet, smart TV, whatever. So your main device categories, and that's a nice little report, I think, particularly for ecom sites. The next one I would probably recommend is the user lifetime report. Again, this is one of the default ones that's available in the gallery, and the lifetime report is really interesting because it organizes it by medium. You can change that to source or whatever you want in terms of the actual data, but the default one then will show you the total users, and then the lifetime average for those users from this particular, in this case, I'll use medium as the example, and then it gives the lifetime engagement duration and the lifetime transactions. And it's a really interesting report because you can very quickly see, it's got a nice kind of bar chart, and you can very quickly see which of your mediums is providing that sort of lifetime, that really good lifetime value. And I was looking at one for a client there the other day, and we could see that people who come in from video, for example, while they're very small in terms of the actual numbers compared to paid search, paid social, organic traffic, whatever it might have been, but the lifetime average was about 10 times more in terms of dollar value than compared to organic and paid advertising, and the whole their engagement duration was significantly more, and the average number of transactions was significantly more as well. So that was a really interesting report, that shows.
Is that an example of one that was not available in GA3 but is available sort of out of the box in GA4?
Yeah, I mean there are lifetime reports in GA3, but this one is just laid out just laid out that much better, and it's just a really nice report. So definitely that's the second one I would recommend. And then the third one, Eric, would be the conversions one. Again, this is very ecom focused, but the conversions report will show you your purchase event, as it's called now, and your source, and you can have a look at your conversions, your event value, and it's got three tabs kind of by default, and you can have a look at your number of conversions by date is another one of the tabs, and then the main tab is again done by device category, so your mobile, desktop, tablet, etc. And you can see then the conversions, the event, the value of the conversions, and if you want to add numbers to your events, not just purchases, such as your add to carts and your begin checkouts and your email signups, etc. You can do that. You can do that as well. So those would be the three kind of default reports that I would kind of recommend, and they're all in that nice template gallery. So the funnel, the user lifetime, and the conversions.
Nice. Get them set up. And while we're going full geek, let's go and talk about server-side tracking, which is again it's an alternative to cookieless, or to the cookie world, which again opens up some certain possibilities. What's happening on the server-to-server tracking side, and how, maybe even back up, even for me as a layman, just a little bit of elevator pitch on what server-to-server tracking is versus what came before.
Yeah, so server-side tracking has come about because of the whole cookieless world that we're all heading into. So whenever iOS 14.5 hit, was that 2 years ago now, Eric? I can't remember. It's crazy. So whenever iOS 14.5 hit, and Apple said, yeah, no, we're not opting in. People automatically, basically, we're opting them out unless they want to opt back in. And suddenly, the lack of cookies meant a big loss of data. So whereas everything used to happen on your browser, essentially, is what cookie tracking is. When you do server-side tracking, the data that was being handled by the cookies on your browser is now being pushed off to a third-party server. I'll come to the options in a minute, but there's a third-party server, and so this server now becomes essentially first-party tracking. So it's handling all of the data. There's no third-party. There's no cookies, and it's a much better way of tracking. And just to give you some sort of stats on what we're seeing with our clients, typically clients, when they go to server-side tracking, are seeing between a 10 to 30% increase in attribution to the various platforms. So the amount of traffic that's being classified as direct and none is going down, and we're seeing this 10 to 30% increase in attribution for wherever you're sending your traffic from, Facebook paid or Google paid or wherever it might be. So it is a very worthwhile option in terms of going server to server, and server side tracking. Your options. So I think on the last podcast I talked about a company called Elevar, who are still out there. So they're one of these companies that have got improved tracking. Essentially what they're doing is they're intercepting your traffic coming from Shopify. So this would be a Shopify specific option. They intercept it. They use their server on the server side, and then they send the data through to GA4 in this particular example. So Elevar is still there. There's a company called Little Data, who are very similar to Elevar, who are doing server-side tracking. Triple Whale, a lot of people probably have heard about, and maybe they're using segment.com. They're another company who are, as part of their offering, are offering server-side tracking. And of course, you could try and do it yourself if you've got the technical capability. Set up your Google Cloud server, and there's lots of tutorials out there showing you how to do it. But of course, setting up a cloud server has got cost implications as well. So if you're probably a small to medium sized business and you're running something like Shopify, then one of those options I've just mentioned there is probably something to go and explore. But definitely worthwhile in terms of in terms of the better attribution that you will get.
Better attribution, better fidelity with your data. What I'm wondering is if you're having all these like server to server connections, is there the opportunity to like send more data or to enrich the data in different ways that wasn't possible in the cookie world? Or is it really just event based? It's just going to send cleaner events when things happen.
It just sends better. It just tracks better. People who are blocking cookies or people who are coming back again or whatever it might be, it just gets better quality of data. So yeah.
Very cool. Anything else to add in the from the Google world, from the technical Google world?
I would just kind of going back to fundamentals, Eric. What I would say was, don't give up on GA3 right now necessarily. Couple of instances I would give for that. First was actually this past week. One of our relatively new clients came to us and said, our GA4 data isn't adding up to our Shopify data. And when we looked at it, it was because their subscription transactions weren't being passed through to GA4. And upon further investigation, it was because the app, who I shall not name, that they were using to handle their subscriptions doesn't still support GA4, so it still only supports GA3. So that might be an example where you'd want to stick with. I would, set up your GA4 for sure, because you're getting some data there right now. But but if it's missing half of your conversion data because half the people subscribe, then it's not going to be that useful. So obviously that would be an example to stick with GA3.
Audit your tech stack and make sure that your partners are on the same wavelength, I guess,
yeah.
too.
And even Shopify. I mean, Shopify still haven't natively gone to GA4. You go into that preferences section. It's GA3 code that it still needs. Now, apparently that's going to change this month, but it still hasn't. So that's a huge issue. And of course, GA4 itself, Eric, still isn't the finished article. And they did this with GA3 because I'm old enough to remember whenever it launched. The beta versions were okay, and then sort of the last minute, there was all of these reports suddenly appeared. So if you're going looking for your attribution section in GA3, is that all there in GA4? No, it's not, because you can still only do model comparisons and conversion paths, as opposed to some of the other stuff you can do in GA3. Your conversion probability section in your behavior part of GA3 still isn't in GA4. So there's still things that aren't there natively. You can go digging, but I think if Google wants to get people, going to GA4 as their, platform of choice, and they still need to beef up the kind of the default reporting that's there.
I love that Google, just like the All Killer No Filler podcast, is doing it live. They're moving at the speed of science, and it's all happening so quickly. It's super interesting, and I would say until there is an AI out there just to take all this over for you, you should just consider going to pilothouse.co. You get to work with Richard. It's a no-brainer. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast on GA3, GA4. We'll be back with technical updates on all these platforms. Richard, thanks for coming on All Killer No Filler.
You're very welcome. I hope people find it riveting.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilothouse's All Killer No Filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C podcast. We'll see you next time.